Отже, ми будемо розповідати про нашу грантову програму, цілі, що ми хочемо досягнути, наводити деякі приклади.
So we're going to speak about the grant program and what we aim for, and we're going to give examples. And also we're going to be fielding your questions, collecting them and answering them later maybe. Let's have it from the project manager, Robert Bond. It's going to be a welcoming address.
Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Yulia. About a month ago, we held a roundtable in Lviv to talk about access to finance in Ukraine and the programs of international financial institutions. At that time, I announced that we were going to have our own grants program and that we would be also providing assistance on a concessionary basis to financial institutions in Ukraine. This meeting is the launch of that activity. What we have today for you is about a 30-minute presentation. Yulia is going to talk about the importance of the grant program to our overall financial sector reform activity. Colleen Green, who's the Vice President for Economic Growth at DAI, is going to provide some examples of the kinds of proposals or concepts you might advance. And then Ilona Shuk, who's my grants manager, is going to talk about some of the procedural issues. This is the first step in our process, and we hope it to be a fast-paced, quick-acting activity. But the first step is to address the market and ask the market for concepts and ideas about how they would spend grant funds to leverage funding to MSMEs. So we are looking for ideas. We are, at this stage, the only requirements to present a proposal are that you are registered in Ukraine and licensed to do an activity. We will worry about other issues as we go forward into the application stage. Our intent is to receive the proposals from you and evaluate them, do a short list, and then move to the application process, directly negotiating with people who are on the short list. We are confident that the financial institutions that we're dealing with will come up with innovative proposals, because frankly, that's what doing business in the financial sector is all about. It's innovation. So we have cast our net widely. We've asked associations, we've asked banks, we've asked leasing companies, factoring companies, anybody that has anything to do with finance is eligible and invited to submit a proposal. I will only say that the only limitation we have right now is the total dollar amount is $5 million. I don't think you should waste your time trying to figure out whether or not a $250,000 proposal is better than $1 million proposal, or whether or not you want to submit a proposal for the entire amount. What we are looking for at this stage is your best ideas, the most impactful ideas, meaning by impactful, I mean proposals that will get money in the hands of small and medium-sized enterprises and will increase either exports or taxes or job creation or recovery in a particular sector. So we are looking for impact, but the definition of impact is supposed to come from you, as is the concept. So that's all I really wanted to say. I really do want to encourage everyone to submit a proposal that has a good idea. It doesn't have to be terribly elaborate. We're asking for a limited expression of interest at this point, but we will use the proposals to shortlist firms that we will then go forward to negotiate. So, Yulia, back to you.
Дякую, Роберт. Тоді рухаємось далі за програмою. Я спробую поділитися.
Thank you. Let's move on. Let me try and share my screen.
Так. Ділюся екраном. Підкажіть, будь ласка, чи видно мою презентацію?
Видно.
Добре. Добре. Отже, про що я буду говорити? Буду говорити...
Alrighty. So we're hitting pay dirt. This is what we're after. This is what the whole thing is about. This grant program is focused on the financial sector. We are a financial sector project and we take care of the supply side, the ones that provide financial services and provide finance and financial products. This program is not about dealing directly with businesses. There are other USAID-led projects that are doing that. At the end of the day, we try and help businesses, but we work through intermediaries in the financial sector. And you could have seen the list of organizations, institutions that are encouraged to come up with their concepts: banks, non-banking institutions, capital market players, associations, NGOs, the ones that operate in the financial sector and seek to mobilize finance for SMEs this way or another. There is an applied nature of this effort. Right now, we're looking for the proposals which will feature a specific measurable impact, which is an increased finance for MSMEs, which will help them create more jobs to pay more taxes. It will help them reach new heights and new markets. So it is something that businesses will be able to gain and demonstrate. So these grants, this program, does not seek to do a theoretical study or something theoretical. So it is a purely applied kind of program. These funds are supposed to produce a stimulating effect, and we understand that the funds themselves can never be enough to make a tremendous impact. So we encourage the concepts which will combine various funding sources, and that's where the grant money can catalyze, can become an extra tool in addition to what you're doing in the MSME sector. The colleagues will speak further on about particular examples of that. And just one more thing to be highlighted at the moment. What are the mechanisms behind it? One of them is lending and also investments. And there are things that accompany these processes. There is no other way MSMEs can gain funding, so it's either lending or investment. So these are the main tools, plus ancillary services and measures. This is the information that was indicated in our public statement. So what I have told you about should be described in the proposal from your side, like how it's going to be done, what are the capacities of your institution to do it, and what kind of impact it will have in terms of specific KPIs. The slide also highlights one item from our public statement. It's about the preferential approach. I would say the main focus is placed on the projects and concepts that will minimize the ill effects of the war on businesses. It may be businesses in the occupied areas, so relocated businesses, the ones that have been affected and the ones that have had the hardest times to survive. We can think of critical sectors of economy as well. So these are the kinds of things that you have to highlight. You need to provide enough rationale for that in order to let us know why those things are critical and how they're going to minimize the ill effects of the war. Supporting women's business is also a part of the deal in this project. And prior to addressing specific examples, let me tell you this. This assistance has to be seen as a financial leverage of a kind. And if you use other funding sources and your ideas, it will be able to produce an impact of scale, a scalable impact. It'll be something that will help cover operating expenses, capital expenses. It will help reduce risks as well. If risks are down, well, there are different ways of doing that. You can use guarantee mechanisms, or you can think of compensations or replacement of collateral for clients, or advance payments or contributions. All of that might help reduce the worth of the loans for clients. So co-funding, contributions to the capital, risk reduction mechanisms, value reduction mechanisms, or cost reduction mechanisms. One more thing, maybe technical assistance for drafting and piloting new products. And at the end of the day, this should help increase funding through investments or through lending for MSMEs. And finally, technical support may be possible for each of the above options. So here in the last item, you can see that it's possible to gain consistent technical support. It can be procurement or consulting. All of that is possible. So that's it from me for now, and I'm happy to turn over to Colin Green, the Vice President of DAI on Economic Growth. DAI is the implementing agency of this project. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Yulia, and good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the examples that we have used across USAID projects around the world. These are, we're going to go through some examples that have been a little bit customized to the Ukrainian context, but I hope that they'll be helpful concepts to you in sort of thinking about what you could be putting forward to FSR for a possible grant. I did want to mention a few of the sort of typical uses we have for grants. As I think, you know, as Robert mentioned and Yulia mentioned, this is really intended to incentivize lending towards a particular set of businesses, in this case, small and medium enterprises, or it might be to new types of clients. That could be relocated businesses, it could be women-owned businesses, or certain types of developmentally focused business, say in climate. As Yulia mentioned, it may be that we typically use these grants to supplement a capital raise that might already be happening, where we provide a little bit of incentive fundings to enable that leverage to happen, to enable private players or to enable international financial institutions to come in and put their money alongside ours. We have used this to complement a guarantee from the US, or lending from the US Development Finance Corporation or another type of international financial institution. We have used these grants to offset costs that you might be incurring when you develop a new product to target a new market segment. And it might also be used, this grant might also be used to invest in specific types of technology that would enable either that direct lending or that investment to happen. Typically through these grant structures, we use two types of loans, two types of grants. One of those is a fixed award amount. So these are milestone-based grants that make payments based on the achievement of specific milestones within the grant agreement. So if a capital raise is one of the targets, hitting that capital raise would allow a payment to flow. And I'll go through some of these examples that we have used in other contexts. But that is a very typical mechanism that we use with our grants. We also use standard grants, which basically reimburse you for costs that you incur along the way, but those have to be documented costs that we can then see. And these grant mechanisms typically have some kind of a monthly or quarterly reporting requirement. They require documentation of disbursement requests and other types of actions. They will certainly require site visits and other types of ad hoc communications with our grants team. And for grants that are larger than $750,000, we will require the submission of external audits. So again, we'll kind of go through some of these examples. So as I mentioned, going to the next slide, we're going to go through a series of examples that have been customized to the Ukrainian context. These are really just some ideas for you to consider. This is certainly not an exhaustive list of ideas, and I'm sure that you all can come up with some things that are equally or more innovative to do. So the first example is a factoring example. It was used to attract outside funding. We used our grant to attract outside funding. So in this case, we had a factoring company who had identified an investor that was willing to provide them with a revolving loan for their invoice discounting. But that investor required that they have at least 2 times the equity for the amount of funding of that revolving fund. So we used a USAID grant to basically increase it was a startup factoring company to increase their equity and that it was a $500,000 grant, and that allowed them to leverage this $1 million revolving fund. And that grant was then provided in tranches of 100,000 in 4 tranches, and each time the factorer hit sort of 75% disbursement of that tranche, then the next tranche would be triggered. And in this case, the factoring company was able to revolve its invoices, ultimately using about $1.5 million in loans and grants to discount $3 million in invoices. So we saw quite a bit of leverage that was able to come through that grant from USAID. Let's go to the next example. So in this example, we used a grant to attract international and local investors into a fund. And in this example, we could be working with a private equity or an investment fund or an asset manager that's interested in establishing a debt fund. And in this example, the asset manager had identified an international financial institution that was willing to take a subordinated debt position to help attract other international and local investors. But the IFI required that at least, again, that this investor had at least 20% equity that they would be able to match. And again, this example, the USAID grant was used for about $1.5 million. $1 million of that was paid in capital to the fund. An initial tranche was also provided of $100,000 to cover some of the setup costs. Those could be legal costs, they could be personnel, back office systems. Another $200,000 was paid as a success fee once an additional $1 million was raised from local investors. And then a final $200,000 was paid once those funds were fully invested in MSMEs, which was the sort of focus of the fund. Again, ultimately about $3 million was raised from local equity investors and $10 million from the IFI, which provided medium-term debt. And in this case, we again customized it for the local context. But I think in this example, I think, we wanted to really show how using the grant again leverages those funds that come in from an international financial institution as well as from local private investors. Next example. Okay, so in this example, we used a grant for first loss capital. In this example, we worked with an agricultural equipment leasing company that had an interested local investor, and they were the investor wished to invest $5 million, but was concerned about potential losses, an estimate of about 10 to 15% potential losses due to damaged equipment. So this might sound familiar. That local investor wanted the leasing company to provide that basically that first loss guarantee. So we used, again, that USAID grant. We provided it to the leasing company. It was held in an escrow account for a period of 2 years, and then was only released when there were damages. But I think this is, again, an example of without that first loss position, that investment would not have been made. So this is a great example, I think, for the current environment. Next example, please. Okay, so this example is used on how to move into a new market segment or product. And in this example, a commercial bank really wanted to increase its lending for movable property, specifically targeting women-owned businesses in the agricultural value chain. And these businesses otherwise did not have sufficient collateral to meet the bank's requirements. So a USAID grant was provided to develop an asset-based lending handbook and guide for the bank, and to develop all of the internal valuation policies. And then some of the funding was used to offset the requirement that borrowers cover 30% of the asset purchase price. So in this case, the commercial bank got a loan of $750,000, or sorry, got a grant of $750,000 used to cover the borrower's contribution. And then the bank was able to sort of determine on a client-by-client basis how to apply those grant funds, and then made those claims in their quarterly reporting to us. Again, this is another example of showing kind of greater impact for the value of the grant. The bank was able to finance about 3.75 million in movable assets, while covering an average of 2/3 of the borrower's upfront contributions to the USAID grant. Next example. Okay, and then in this example is a more of an investment focused example with a fund manager. We used, again, this grant for a first loss position, and also to cover some initial operating expenses. And this is, in this example, a fund manager was interested in raising a new fund that was very specifically targeting a developmental area or sector. That could be in agriculture, it could be healthcare, it could be making investments in relocated businesses or women-owned businesses. I think there's a whole variety of things that could be included in what we would consider developmental. And in order to attract commercial capital, the grant was used again to take a first loss position in the fund, and then to cover some initial operating expenditures like those legal costs, personnel. It could be some of the back office systems required to manage that fund. And then again, like in a previous example, we had a milestone-based grant agreement with tranched grant payments that were paid out as the fund manager was able to raise funds and then place those funds in those businesses, again, within that specific sector. And I think in this particular example, this was a grant of 18 months in duration. So, I think you can see that, they have quite a bit of time to utilize those funds. Next example. I only have 2 more. In this example, a grant was provided to cover the cost of new expertise to develop a specialized financial product, as well as to support staff training. Again, in this example, a bank was interested in getting some outside expertise to develop a new specialized financial product. And then that grant was used to hire outside expertise to help the bank take on that product design, develop their internal systems, train staff, market the product, and then roll out the product. Again, in this example, the leverage actually came from the financial institution itself. So we required the bank to have some of its own, what we would say, skin in the game, which is to say that, we wanted to see that they had made their own commitments in this area by perhaps investing in the development of the strategy for the new product, or putting forward some of its own costs towards the purchase of an IT, purchase or modification of an IT system, or other types of complementary areas that would match the grant that we provided. Again, this is an example of where we saw that leverage or that additionality coming from the financial institution themselves. And then I have one more example. And this last example is an example of a grant that would be used to launch a donation crowdfunding platform for dislocated small and medium enterprises. And I think this was a modified example that we had from, again, from another context that we've modified for the Ukrainian context. But in this example, a Ukrainian fintech that provides money transfer services and had noted that many of the send money transactions were coming in from overseas, saw an opportunity to target overseas Ukrainians to donate money directly to Ukrainian businesses, particularly those that had been dislocated from other parts of the country due to the war. So in this example, the fintech has some of the skills to develop the application technology, but really wanted to hire a community outreach team to help them develop partnerships with local government, with local NGOs in Ukraine to help them identify those relocated businesses. And they also wanted to use some of those funds for advertising online to reach Ukrainian diaspora and refugees on some of the websites that they visit regularly. In this example, the grant was a bit smaller. $250,000 was what was agreed upon. $100,000 was provided to the fintech to cover some of those community outreach costs, and another $50,000 to cover advertising, and then $100,000 was awarded once $1 million had been channeled from overseas diaspora into the crowdfunding platform and specifically into businesses. So that last sort of payment was a bit of a success fee payment, if you will. But again, these are just a handful of examples that I think our intent is to inspire you to come up with some concepts that are innovative, creative. These are just a few of the things that we have done in other contexts that have worked well, and certainly they can be modified to fit the current state of the economy in Ukraine. I think that is, just to reiterate a point that Robert made at the start, these grants are intended to have a developmental impact. So, the things that we want to be seeing are the ability to use grants so that lending is happening or other types of investments are happening that bring, more revenue to Ukrainian businesses, that create jobs, that, drive exports, potentially even, provide more businesses paying taxes into the national budget. So all of those things we think are very good. And those are the types of things that we're going to be wanting to see in your concept notes. Thank you, and happy to answer some questions at the very end of this. Back to you, Yulia.
Дякую, Колін. Дуже корисна інформація, дуже такі, як на мене.
Thank you so much, Colleen. That's a very useful information, and I appreciate specific examples. Hopefully, this information will come in handy while preparing your concepts and proposals. So I'd like to turn over to Ilona Zhuk. She's our expert on grants and public, community outreach. And she will speak about some organizational aspects and procedural aspects related to drafting and submitting a proposal.
Thanks, Yulia. Just give me 1 second while I share my presentation. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you guys see me? Well, not me, the presentation.
Yes, we can see it. You can probably
Yeah, slideshow. I'm
expand
trying
it, yes.
to slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And I would like to go over some of our grant program application procedures and requirements. And some of these items have already been covered by my colleagues, Colleen, Yulia, and Robert. So as of right now, under this expression of interest, we are seeking concept notes, proposals from banks, non-banks, fintechs, basically any organization that is working in the financial sector and that is legally registered and doing business in Ukraine, and that has demonstrated capacity to achieve the objectives of the expression of interest. And as for the submission requirements, I've been looking through some of the questions that were already submitted to the email address we provided in the instructions. A lot of you were asking about the format and the budget. So as for the format, the only format we have for this concept note is your PowerPoint presentation. Please include no more than 10 slides. And include the following information. And all this information, again, can be found on the EOI that we've published and distributed to the different companies. So such items include organizational overview and track record of providing or facilitating MSME finance, description of catalytic funding request, which includes purpose, how it would work, KPIs, and why USAID support is critical and provides additionality, leverage to be achieved for the catalytic funding received, target businesses and geography, monitoring program for financial results and positive impact on borrowers, governance and management team, and finally, your legal registration and licenses. This is for the information to be provided on the PowerPoint presentation. As for the technical aspects of the PowerPoint presentation, please, it can be either in English or Ukrainian, whichever language works for you. Please include also the title slide, and the title slide does not count against the slide maximum of 10. So in the title slide, please include your name of your organization, the contact information, and the response title. Please try to make it up to 10 megabytes. And when you send your PowerPoint presentation, when you submit your PowerPoint presentation to us, please submit it in 2 formats: in the PowerPoint presentation, as a PowerPoint presentation, and as a PDF file. I think Robert was also mentioning about the budget. Yes, at this point, we're not seeking any detailed budget. That's going to be during the second stage of this process. As for now, we're asking you to provide just your best estimate of the total cost. We would still ask you to provide major line items. So let's say if your proposal includes Labor, you would include labor and the amount that you need. Procurement and the amount that you need. So we can evaluate it as well, but nothing major, detailed, nothing complicated we require from you at this stage. Next, important deadlines. So we're still accepting your questions. Please submit them. Tomorrow is the deadline. Please send your questions that you might still have after this presentation to the FSR_applications@di.com email account. Please do not send them to any other email, to any other personal emails of the staff working for this project. This is the email specifically for this UI concept. Then once we receive all your questions, know that we will not be responding directly to you. What we're going to do instead, we will compile all the questions received during this meeting. We will also include the questions that we will receive to our email address, and then we will include them all in the document that we will publicly distribute. So we'll post it on Poster, and we will also send it to the distribution list that we have. This is in terms of your questions. The proposals, please submit your PowerPoint presentations by February 6th by 22 p.m. East Standard Time. So I believe it's 5 a.m. in Ukraine on February 7th. So just to make sure we receive it, please submit it by the end of February 6th. Also to the same email address, FSR_applications@di.com. An email confirmation receipt of the submission will be sent to you after the deadline. So let's say if somebody submits an application on Monday, you will receive the confirmation from us only after the deadline. So it's going to be after February 6th. And I also remember there were a few questions about the proposals and how many concept notes you can submit. If you have different ideas that you want to present, it is totally fine if you send us different concept notes. Just make sure that when you send these concept notes, each of them should follow the requirements that I indicated in the previous slide, and you can also find in the EOI. So for each concept note that you submit, you need to include a presentation and the budget. Okay, the next one. So we are right now in stage 1, the expression of interest. Once we receive all the expressions of interest, also it's important to note that they will not be evaluated against each other. They will be just evaluated on the basis of your concept note. So we will convene an evaluation committee. We will review your applications, and I would love to give you a more precise deadline, but I think it mainly depends on how many applications we will receive. We expect it to be 1 to 2 months for evaluation. It might be quicker, it might be longer. Again, it depends on the amount of the concept notes that we will receive. FSR will shortlist the companies from the submitted expression of interest, and the shortlisted companies will be invited to stage 2 of this grant process. Not all of the submissions will be invited to stage 2, but in any case, you as a prospective grantee, you will receive an email confirmation from us whether your concept note goes to stage 2 or whether we will not be proceeding with this concept note at this time. As for the stage 2, that's going to be an RFA. RFA is a little bit, well, it's not a little bit, it's quite different from the EOI in that it's more precise. The objectives will be more narrow. And let me see, I think, yes, this is a better slide for this. So RFI typically will include, again, the technical scope of the grant program. It will include the anticipated number of awards and the ceiling of the award, types of organizations, period of performance. It will also have the submission requirements, we will include the cost share percentage, if any, if we require for this proposal, selection criteria, and the stages of the RFA, they're quite similar to those of the EOI that we will also, once we receive the proposals, we will convene evaluation committee, we will review the proposals. But then once we select the proposals that we want to move to the pre-award stage, at that point, the grants team and the technical team, we will be working directly with the potential grantee on refining their scope of work, on refining their budget. At that point, for the RFA, we will be RFA will be asking for a very specific and detailed budget. And once this co-creation process is completed, we will be sending the award package to USAID, because all of our grants needs to be approved by USAID. We won't be able to issue any grants without their approval. I think Colleen mentioned a few grant types that we're working with usually for this type of grants. Those are fixed amount awards and standard grants. Here you can see two additional types, in-kind grants and simplified grants. And you can also see different criteria, different rules that are applicable to each of this grant. So for instance, in cases of the FIA, the fixed amount award, they are based on milestones. They're based on specific deliverables. The thing is, under FIAs, no advances are allowed. So we will need to make sure that the organization that is awarded the FIA grant has the financial capacity to actually manage the grants, manage the project for at least 3 months before the milestone is achieved and the payment can be made. As for the standard grants, they are cost reimbursable. So we will require you to submit your invoices along with the receipts of the cost incurred. But in this case, we can actually give the grantee in advance. And you can also see a different criteria for simplified and in-kind grants. And again, this presentation will be distributed to all the participants, so you can look through the requirements. And finally, just to be mindful of the time, just a few more considerations as you're going to be for those of you who are going to be working with us on the RFA. A few things. So if, let's say, I think also one of my colleagues mentioned that if you receive more than $750,000 in one fiscal year from any federal funded awards, it doesn't have to be USAID, but just from US government, we will have to ask you to conduct an annual audit of your financial statements. Another thing is, once if we issue you a grant which exceeds $500,000, the total grant, it doesn't have to be per year, but the total grant, you will be required to submit trafficking in person certification annually. Another thing that will be required from you, but only at the stage if your proposal during the RFA stage is moved to the pre-award stage. So when you apply to RFA, you don't need to have the unique, entity ID. But once you are moved to the pre-award stage, the grants team will help you to register in the award management system and to acquire this unique ID. I think that's it. That's what I wanted to cover. But yes, you will have this presentation for your reference. So Yulia, back to you.
Дякую, Ілона. В принципі, ми завершили свою частину.
Thank you, Ilona. So basically, we're done with the first part, presentation part. So let's see what are the questions out there. I guess I'm going to be able to see raised hands and points in the chat. So everybody's welcome to raise their hands and write in the chat. So I'll see which of our team will be able to address particular questions. There might not be an answer ready right now, so then you're gonna get the answer later on. There was a question in the chat about the range of project budgets, minimum, maximum. Maybe it's a question for Robert or Ilona. So Robert,
As I said, focus on the idea and the concept. Don't worry about the budget. If I got a really great proposal for $4,990,000, that would be great. I don't think that's likely to happen, but we'll see. There is no minimum amount. There's no maximum amount beyond the $5 million. At this stage, we're looking for ideas and ideas that will be impactful on all the sorts of criteria that we have discussed.
Друге запитання, на яку адресу буде розсилка? Я так
the
розумію.
second question is what will be the address where all of these messages will be coming to?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can answer that. We will, so we will make sure that whatever sites we use to publish the EOI, those sites will also contain the answers to your questions. So we'll either amend our posting, or we will post another one that contains our answers to your questions. We will also, I think, if you would like just to have it, I'm not sure if you would like to have it directly sent to you, it's fine. I mean, like if you've submitted your questions to the FSR email address, you can just include or send an email to the FSR email address, and I will send it to you as well. But we will publicly make it available to you via Gurt, Prostir, and I'm sure, Marina, where else we published it. I think it was also included in the Facebook of the FSR activity.
На Фейсбуці ми давали лінк.
Link, okay. And we can
There is a
also-
link that takes you to the Facebook page.
But definitely on Gurt, and yes, we will definitely upload it to Prostir as well.
Наступне запитання з чату, два запитання.
There are two more questions from the chat. How can you calculate the impact? What's the methodology behind it, the impact from catalytic funding, and how they're going to monitor financial performances? I think those are the questions for Robert. I can actually add something.
The impact. And the next question is, how should the monitoring program look like of the financial results?
I'm going to defer to Ilona on the details of the procedure. As far as the methodology for calculating impact, I don't think it's really all that difficult. There are multiple ways of calculating the impact of financing on job creation or export markets or revenue growth, et cetera. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. Again, be creative in terms of what you're trying to do. You should also know, I think, that we do have a grants management team at FSR. Ilona is the manager, but we also have 2 or 3 other officers who are involved in the program, plus our administrative staff, plus our technical professionals from our financial intermediation and fintech and legal team. So all of those people will be involved in the process at some point in terms of evaluating proposals and monitoring proposals.
Yeah, and just to add to what Robert said, at this stage in the EOI process, we did not include any KPIs, the key performance indicators, or anything from our monitoring and evaluation, because we're just seeking to receive your ideas. So be creative. I mean, if you're, I'm just making up stuff here, but if you're working with grantees, like how many beneficiaries have your grant reached in X amount of time? Then once we get to the RFA stage, that's going to be different, because we will have, again, like the objectives will be more narrow than we have right now, and we will provide you with specific key performance indicators and indicators that we have in our monitoring and evaluation manual. But at this point, just because we have more than 100 participants here, we have so many different organizations, and you guys have so many different ideas, it would be impossible for us to include anything that will be overarching all of you. So yeah, be creative.
Дякую. Ну, я так розумію, що над більш детальною програмою моніторингу це буде...
Well, I take it monitoring will be addressed in the second stage once you have selected the best of the ideas. Next thing, should the budget be included in a separate file, or should it be a part of the presentation? And what should be the appropriate format for the budget submission?
If you guys don't mind, I wouldn't mind to have it as a slide. Yeah, you can just include it as part of your presentation. If like, okay, to make it then available to all, maybe we can, you should make it part of your 10 slides. So the requirements stay the same. You will have the title, that is an extra slide, and then you have 10 slides for your presentation, which includes the budget. And again, it should be very short.
Yeah, no, I wanted to emphasize on the budget, we're looking for major budget line items. We're not asking you for the number of hours of a legal professional, or the number of hours that are going to be spent by a finance specialist, or, you know, we're not looking for that level of detail at this point. We'd like to have a general idea on a few lines as to what the major cost items that you see. And if you would also like to include the overall amount of the project and the amount that you're contributing, great, but we're not looking for detail.
Наступне запитання, я поки ще читаю з чату, я бачу руки.
Okay, the next thing I can see in the chat,
Що мається на увазі під використанням гранту?
when you say using a grant in order to make it a part of the capital, tell us more about that.
A grant being like a contribution to the capital, so the grant as an equity financing, what is meant by that? Do you have like any examples, ideas about that?
I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, so I will try my best to answer it. But I mean, basically, we are using, in some instances, the grant as donated equity. But donated equity with the intent to leverage much larger funding that will have ultimately have a developmental purpose. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, well, I sort of the similar answer if we understand the question correctly. Так, для...
Julia, I just want to say, let's provide them with an example. The EBRD has agreed to give a $10 million line to a small business equity investment fund. But to get that money, they need to have 10% of it as a capital. And the investment company doesn't have that money, but they may have $250,000 of it. We could give a grant to make up the difference.
Yeah, the other example I would give, it was the factoring example, was the same donated equity where the company had some equity, but they didn't have sufficient equity in order to tap a larger revolving fund line of credit. So it would be the same. We would top up basically the equity to enable them to tap a much larger pool of lending capital.
Наступне запитання про аудит фінансової звітності, що для
Next
проекту
thing is about financial statement audits. If the project goes above $750,000, then you have to complete the audit. Is this going to be the audit of the project costs only or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I can confirm. To my knowledge, you need to, you know what, I'm not even gonna guess. Let me confirm that. And this is one of the questions that we will be responding during in the document that we will be distributing, because I don't have the answer available.
Добре, тобто щодо цього питання ми будемо ще уточнювати.
All right, we're going to go back to this over time. So, I can see people's hands. Agri Analytica, I can see your hand. Come on.
I'll try to ask the question in English so that directly probably be answered by your colleagues. So I read the prerequisites quite carefully, and today I listened to the presentation, but still I'm confusing about if our company is eligible to participate and apply for this grant. So probably it was too long to type. Maybe I would just 30 seconds. So we are a fintech company, which is not a financial institution by nature, but we are contributing to the disbursement of agri-SME lending by over 40 financial institutions registered in Ukraine and who are participating in our platform. So last year we assisted and successfully disbursed over 1.2 billion hryvnias to over 600 SME farmers. So just to understand if we have to be a licensed financial institution or a financial company, or still we can present some proposals which we have a bunch of and be eligible for this grant.
I can answer that. So you don't have to have the license of a financial institution. You see that the range of other participants are broader. You have to work in the financial sector, be related, provide some activities in the financial sector. And by the way, fintech is even specifically mentioned in the proposal as an example. So no, you don't have to have the license. You have to work in the financial sector somehow, because we also have associations, for example, of banks or of factoring, of leasing. They are not a financial institution, but they work and contribute in the financial sector. So yes, you can apply.
I would just add, you must be a registered business.
Yeah, registered.
Oh, yeah, we are,
yeah.
and then we are constantly receiving some extra funding from USAID branches, so probably
Okay.
we'll try to
You have to be a Ukrainian company.
We are.
And I just
100% private and 100% Ukrainian, yeah.
perfect. I also wanted to mention that if you qualify as a licensed, registered, private Ukrainian company, whatever you are, if your proposal included funding from an outside source, that's fine. But the grantee has to be your company, not the outside source.
Okay.
Окей, наступне запитання. Прошу, Володимир Зеленчук, бачу на екрані.
Okay, Vladimir Zelenchuk, your question, please. Hello, I represent a credit union in the agricultural sector. I think I have partly received an answer, but can somebody confirm that a credit union could apply for a grant? Is that possible? I didn't see any problems with that. At this stage, you are eligible. As far as I can see, you are eligible. Thank you. And there was a similar question in the chat. Can business associations apply for the grant? So non-governmental, non-for-profit organizations, can they do it individually or jointly with a credit union or a financial institution to organize a special fund for developing MSMEs in Ukraine? So business associations individually or jointly with credit unions or financial institutions can do it. So to me, There is no problem with that. You just need to have a clearly determined grantee. If you do it jointly with somebody else, then one of you should be a grantee, and you need to indicate that one precisely.
You can add here if there are two organizations. One is like a business association or some entity, and the other is a credit union. How they can apply, like in tandem.
Sorry, was that to me, Yulia, or is that?
No. She
No,
was
to
she's
Ilona.
asking me. I'm just I don't recall. I think it's fine for them to apply in tandem, right? I don't see any issue for them to apply in tandem. Yeah, they can
don't
just
see
like
any
apply as
issue.
a coalition, or it's not a coalition. I'm not sure how to properly name it.
It's like a, yeah, it's a partnership. It's, yeah,
Partnership.
it's, yeah.
Так, наступне запитання. Якщо для реалізації програми
Next question. If you need to register a legal entity to implement your program, can you get an advance payment for registration? Or do you have to do it at your expense first and then you can get a compensation?
So just briefly summarizing, the question is if a legal entity needs to be registered, is it possible to get the advance for the registration, or the applicant has to do the registration first of all and then apply? Моя думка така, що це повинна бути зареєстрована юридична особа.
Well, I think you should be already registered as a legal entity in the first place.
So you're, just to clarify, you're suggesting a startup.
Basically, yes. Vladislav, if you are here, you can comment maybe orally, because you have another question here. Okay, and yeah.
Yes, if possible, yeah. So we are talking about not exactly a startup, but an organization that will be association of players of the market. So that's exactly the new entity, and creation of this new entity is in fact a responsibility of the founders. And because this is the budget that was not actually previewed or planned for founders' budgets for the year of the war, we are looking forward to possibility to obtain the grant in advance to conduct this registration with the funds that are earmarked for actually activity of this organization. So the project that we are going to implement is actually the activity of this organization and the benefits that will be coming from this organization. So it is necessary to clarify if we can apply for this standard grant that you mentioned, that it can be paid in advance, or we have to mobilize some funds on the balance sheet of founders, also not commercial organizations, but associations. And so we are in this position where we would like to have this kind of grant instead of vice versa, paying our own funds and then coming back for payment of accounts with invoices.
I'm still a little bit confused, because maybe Colleen, you understand it better, because we can issue grants only if you're already registered. So if, let's say, you as an organization, you already have your registration in Ukraine and you're operating in Ukraine, but then you're creating a different entity, and maybe that can be part of your grant, the creation of that entity, then yes, because we would not be giving the grant to the entity, we would be giving a grant to you. That's how I understand it, because in that case, if the entity has not been created yet, we don't technically have anyone to give the grant to. Do I get it right?
That's
Or
correct,
to
yeah.
the founders, or to
Yeah,
the
it has to go to the
founders,
founders,
but
we
has to
can-
be some legal entity.
Yeah, we can issue to private, I mean, to people. We
No.
can only issue to organizations.
Now, the answer is clear, register.
Yeah, register. Okay. The short answer is yeah, well, you need to have registration.
І наступне запитання було також від Владислава, чи можлива оплата за рахунок
There's a question from Vladislav.
іншої міжнародної фінансової
Can we have any other IFI to cover the cost at the expense of a grant for consulting services?
within the grant?
So if I understood, so the IFI would be covering some of the operation costs, but you would be coming to us for some other aspect of a product.
Actually, this is a different question. It is not connected to the previous one, to the organization, which will be the market association. Here is just a consideration of idea that where we have, you mentioned that bank is creating a product, and this product is new for the market, and the expertise that is provided to create such product is coming from an international financial institution. So is it feasible? Is it eligible to obtain your grant to pay such expertise?
And our grant would be used for what purpose, just to clarify?
To create a new financial product that will widen possibility to finance small and medium-sized enterprises, including private entrepreneurs. So that's a product that will be in cohesion with your purpose of the program. Just this creation of product requires purchase of consultations from not from local consultant, but from the organization that is similar to you, to USAID.
Yeah.
So is it possible?
Vladislav, as I understand it, the grant program, you need to be licensed and registered and doing business or intending to do business in the financial sector. That's the sort of bottom line for the expression of interest. What kind of proposal you put together is up to you. If you are a business association, the Association of Factoring Banks in Ukraine, and you have a proposal that says, we're going to manage this and we're going to work with these 5 banks, and the IFC is going to come in and give us a grant for $100,000 to do marketing, and the EBRD is going to give us $500,000 to do something else, and you wrap it all up and says your grant would go to these costs, there's no problem. You can do partnerships in this thing. Banks and business associations can come together. Banks and business associations and financial companies and IFIs can all join as long as the grantee is a Ukrainian source. So, as I said, be creative.
Thank you, Robert. In fact, it was a little bit different aspect because I'm also representing the bank, which is working on some development of new products, and that was a question on behalf of the bank whether we can go for this grants if we develop some new products.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But again, like I think just I wanted to reiterate that the products, certainly the most successful concepts are going to be those that are more developmentally focused. Sorry, my voice is giving out. So ideally to SMEs or other relocated businesses, but I think we want to, that would be our interest is one, that you're getting, it sounds like you're getting some other kind of leverage from another party, another financial institution, international financial institution, and would also be serving that developmental purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Наступне запитання, чи може бути заявником інвестиційний фонд, чи може фонд
Can an investment fund apply for the funds, and can they invest the grant funds into their projects, which create jobs and things like that? I can start answering. Basically, yes. Actually, in one of the examples, they spoke about the investment fund, but you have to remember about the scalability effect and incentivization. So you might use multiple funding sources in this case. we're not supposed to be the only source for your endeavors. What you do should help attract other sources, extra funding sources and options. But formally, yes, investment fund is eligible. Next question, can a financial company apply for a standard grant to refinance existing loans and to offer new loans?
To refinance current loans and provision of new loans. Ну, в принципі, відповідь, напевно, така сама, як до попереднього.
Well, basically, I can say yes, it's possible. But you have to indicate the impact, the benefit from this. You have to clearly indicate that. Next one. Can insurance companies take part in the program? They do not offer loans to businesses directly, yet they offer services to MSMEs. Well, insurance companies are a part of the financial sector, so they are eligible. You might think of interest in insurance programs to insure financial risks. Maybe you can think of partnerships with other financial institutions, so you can give it a whirl. Is it possible to get a grant in order to cover prudential standards for an investment company in order to buy the bonds?
For an investment firm, in particular to purchase the government bonds? Я б сказала, що ні.
I guess it's not possible. That's not quite the purpose of this program. So an investment company seems to be eligible, but I don't think it serves the purpose of this program and the impact we expect. So this concept, I guess, will not be appreciated so much. So Robert, anything from you?
Okay.
Okay, got it. One more question about the insurance companies. So an insurance company offers insurance for trade loans, in which case we need guarantees in order to insure the risks. Can we use the grant in order to do reinsurance? Well, again, formally, a grant might be used for that, but you need to show how it's going to aid in increasing the volume of trade loans. So you have to demonstrate the impact. It's not just about paying fees or commission. So in any event, it should be tied to your funds or funds from the third parties. Can a lending company cover its losses under the loans that were given to farmers, and because of the war they cannot repay them? So can we use the grant in order to cover those bad loans for farmers?
For the loans that were issued to farmers who were under the occupation. Ну, мабуть, це подібне до питань про підтримання пруденційних
I think it's similar to the question about maintaining the prudential ratios. I don't think it's the purpose of the program, actually. So that's not the impact we'd like to have from this concept. The coverage of losses, I don't think it fits in. Dmitry, let's have your question.
Thank you for thorough presentation. I'm Dmitro from Advantage Ukraine, investment facilitation platform initiated by the President's Office. So I actually have a few questions from our side. First of all, it's more general one. It's about how do you define SME businesses, because there are conflicting like definitions in Ukraine, in US, and in Europe. So in Europe, let's say, small and medium businesses are those businesses with turnover of less than 50 mil and headcount of less than 200 people. But in Ukraine, it's a completely different thing. So that's the first one.
I'll take a stab at this. I would think that we would use a local definition, a Ukrainian definition of what is a small and medium enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Another one. You elaborated on some examples in your presentation, and actually every of your examples was related to addressing a concrete issue of concrete organization or concrete SME. But do you mandate covers like a general framework developing for fostering, let's say, credit flow to SME businesses? I am talking about like portfolio guarantees from IFIs, like war risk coverage to de-risk the borrowers and other like an instrument. So that's the second one.
Sorry, I don't know if I heard exactly. You asked a question about portfolio guarantees from IFIs. Part of what we're trying to do with the grant program is in addition to other portfolio guarantees that may be available in the market. We certainly, separate of this grant program within FSR, hope to be working with the DFC on structuring some guarantees, but the guarantees take a very long time to put in place. So this is something that's much more immediate that we have some control over. And in many cases, we're using these grants in similar ways to a guarantee, like taking a first loss position. So I'm not sure if I exactly answered your question.
Actually, my question was about the general framework. Would you grant will cover like general framework development of portfolio guarantees with the related changes in legislation in NBU orders to make this guarantee work in Ukraine? Because before that we were working on the project with USAID to roll out some portfolio guarantees and refinancing schemes for Ukrainian banks, and that's why I'm asking.
I might defer that one to Bob or Yulia. I mean, that sounds like a much bigger framework that we would certainly be interested in, but perhaps outside the framework of this grants program.
Yeah,
but I defer to the others.
In general, I would say we would probably that would come under a different part of our technical assistance. We do have funds for hiring consulting firms or hiring individuals or employing law firms or whatever to work on specific financial issues. If there was a proposal that a grant concept that combined different aspects and it said one of the key things we have to solve is a legal regulatory issue with the NBU and we need $50,000 for legal fees to solve that, then I would say sure. That could be included because we can include legal assistance and technical assistance as part of an overall grant. The main point would be whether or not that technical assistance and legal assistance would be specific to a particular project there or activity you were doing.
Okay. And the last one from my side, you're probably aware that for some time idea of establishing a private equity funds which would invest in SME through like classical equity injection or through some mezzanine financing schemes was hovering in the air in Ukraine, because the area is not covered by other institutions. Like we have Horizon on the ground, but there is no such fund for SMEs businesses in Ukraine. So would you consider providing a financing for establishing such funds? Because just setup cost of such funds would be about $200,000 to establish a proper fund in let's say in Luxembourg jurisdiction to get proper partnership agreements. And another one related question. So once we establish this fund, the next stage would be to have a roadshow to raise some equity to this fund among international investors. And ultimately, the success of the fund will depend on the success of our roadshow. Let's say you finance some first stage, like set up in the fund and set up in the team. But as in every business, we could fail during our roadshow, and we may fail raising the sufficient funds. So would it be the case for you to finance?
So yes, this was one of the examples that I gave, but we would not finance the entirety of that fund. We would be willing to put some equity into the fund as let's say an incentive to bring other investors into that fund. So, and certainly we would be willing to cover some of the startup expenses that were associated with that. But I think the more successful concepts are going to be those where we already see interest from some other international investors that you can demonstrate in your concept note that might be willing to come in and take a position in that fund. So I think if you could demonstrate, certainly we're interested in startup funds, particularly those that have a developmental impact, maybe in an important sector of the economy. We would be willing to provide some of that equity or that first loss position if that's a way to de-risk other investors that come in. So I think there's different ways that it could be structured. So that is definitely a concept that we would consider.
Cool.
And just to add to what Colleen said, we can disburse grant in tranches depending on the milestones and deliverables. So the more successful you are, you can then get the next tranche, like you mentioned, the roadshow, for example, or if you manage to line up some investors, you can get another tranche of grant. So that's the approach.
Okay, thank you.
Можна
Давайте повернемося тоді.
питання?
Так. Давайте.
Питання можна, Яшкін?
Давайте.
Я хотів
I've got a
би...
question. I'd like to go back to prudential ratios. Well, there is an investment company which has been affected by the war. The Securities Commission has introduced new liquidity standards this year. So 50% of the original capital should be either in money or in the government bonds. The company might have assets in other securities, but it doesn't matter to the Commission. So we would need a grant in order to meet the demands of the Commission, which is 50% of the original capital. I got it, and I think I have furnished an answer. I don't think it's our purpose. We cannot fund things like that. We cannot cover those losses, all of the NPAs. It might not necessarily be an NPA, but still, our purpose is to fund MSMEs, and these funds need to end up in the hands of the MSMEs. That's the way. Okay, I got it. Thanks. Next thing, if the project will pilot innovations, will it be a way to keep this cooperation going if the piloting is successful? Well, I didn't quite understand the question. There's always a way to continue cooperation within the grant program or outside of it. So we did some cooperation outside the grant program.
Чи можуть бути партнерами, окрім бізнес-об'єднання, у створенні
Next question is about partners that can be, say, local authorities. Can they be involved in the partnership for receiving the grant?
Can the municipalities and some like municipalities and city councils be partners of a financial institution in the grant? Will it enhance the proposal? Ну, на мою думку, партнерами вони можуть бути, вони не можуть бути грантоотримувачами.
Well, they can be partners, they cannot be grantees, but local authorities, municipalities, and the like, they can be partners of a project. I think it is possible.
Чи можливе фінансування проектом залучення експертизи для розробки нормативних та
Can the project involve
законодавчих
experts to draft pieces of legislation in the field of investment funding? I'm speaking about securities that are covered by leasing agreements. Well, Robert partly spoke about that earlier on. So if a grant is going to be spent on drafting pieces of legislation, it doesn't quite match the purpose of the grant. For things like that, we've got other budget. If it's tied to some specific institutions or projects or initiatives, products, which will be an additional thing that should be done in order to launch something done, we can consider it as an ancillary activity. Vladislav, you have a question? Yes, I do. There is one more. You may have spoken about that, but let's see. Can a government institution apply for a grant, say the Entrepreneurship Development Fund or something like that?
So colleagues, who will take this?
I can, we can, yeah, Bob, if you want to add to that. So we are still confirming that. We might be able, I mean, you know what, I don't want to waste your time because we still don't have the answer, but at the same time, we don't want to miss out an opportunity to receive your amazing concept note if it's a concept note from a government institution, and at the end we actually can accept them. So as of right now, we're still waiting for a confirmation from USAID if we can or cannot. So if there is a ability of this institution to submit their concept note, please do so. And at the end, I mean, if not, then we will just not move to the RFA stage. But yeah, if they could just please submit it.
Yes, thank you very much.
My answer is yes, they should submit a concept if they have a good concept, a good idea, and grant funding would make sense. Ilona is correct. On some cases, we're going to have to go and get clarification from USAID about what we can and cannot, or who is eligible or who is not. But given the current circumstances, there is a clause in almost everything we do with USAID that says exigent circumstances. And exigent circumstances just means unusual occurrences and events. So if we get a really good proposal from Business Development Fund or Advantage Ukraine or Oshad Bank or whatever, we are going to consider them at this stage. And we will, if we need to seek waivers, we will seek waivers and involve USAID in the process. So at this stage, yes, you're eligible. And I think the answer is if you've got a great proposal, you're going to be given an award at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Наступне запитання, максимальне обмеження щодо
Next thing, what are the maximum limits for a grant? 5 million, is that a total for the grant or for a company? That's a total for the grant, not for a company. Okay, next one.
Yeah, let me just add one quick comment. The total amount of funds we have right now is $5 million. Will that amount of funding be replenished or restored? I think the answer is probably yes. if the program is successful and we get good ideas. Lots of other USAID programs, projects have received supplemental funding, and that supplemental funding has gone to new grant programs. So if we have a great program, yes, I think we'll get supplemental funding and be able to move forward.
Наступне запитання, чи є можливість подати кілька
Next thing, is it possible to come up with a few proposals from one participant? So there might be a few potential initiatives. Some of them can be done by companies themselves, others through partnerships, but can they come up with a few proposals?
Concepts
Yeah,
from
definitely.
one entity.
Yes, and I think I also included in my presentation, you can definitely submit several concepts from one entity, but make sure to follow the instructions. So each of your submissions need to have a PowerPoint presentation and need to have a proposed budget, even like without major details, but you do need to submit PowerPoint presentation for each of your concept node. Otherwise, it's not going to be considered as a complete submission.
Наступне запитання, чи відомий механізм оподаткування гранту, який отримує...
What about taxation of the grants that will go to the financial institutions? Well, we cannot talk about taxation right now. It depends on the status or type of a grantee. So I'm not going to speak about taxes right now. It's up to a particular situation. Do you have to sign an NDA with the USAID based on the ideas proposed?
I think it should be. No? No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is the question, are you asking whether we will sign an NDA? You would not need to sign an NDA with us at the first stage, but.
As I understand, the question is, well, maybe you can clarify the question, but then who owns the intellectual property right? Who will the grantee retain? AID? Or who will, yeah?
It's a good question. I'll defer to.
Yeah, we can take a note of that. NDA.
Yeah, it's worth checking on, but my answer is we're going to evaluate your proposal. We're not going to do anything with it beyond that. And we will make sure that the evaluators all sign their own conflict of interest forms and non-disclosure forms so that your proposal will be private.
Наступне запитання. МСП, хто вони? Інвестори, позичальники, емітенти, фінансові установи.
MMSMEs, what are those? They are the ones that are going to receive funding. They will receive money, finance. They can be borrowers, they can be whatever. So this funding is offered by financial institutions. So SMEs cannot be financial institutions at the same time, or it might be something complicated. So I didn't quite understand this question. What are the MMSMEs?
The term itself stands for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So that's all I can tell you.
І ще декілька тут запитань. Зараз
I can see a few more questions. Just a sec.
Це мені в директ просто прийшло. Зараз, якщо я знайду.
They came to me directly.
Використання гранту на програму зменшення вартості фінансового продукту.
If we need to reduce the financial cost of a product for a client, then how can we determine the share of the coverage of the interest under the grant? So how much of the interest can be covered at the expense of the grant? So the idea is to reduce the cost of the financial product at the expense of the grant. Is that possible? And how much of that can be reduced or covered by the grant?
Anything in your experience and examples? We definitely don't have anything defined in the formal requirements. So there are no such numbers.
Yulia, and I would just mention again, like the applicants, please focus on the EOI, on the requirements on the EOI. We don't have any cost share, any kind of percentages at this stage. So just as Bob was mentioning many times, please just submit your ideas, and then we will evaluate your ideas on the basis of the requirements that we that we have in the expression of interest. So don't think right now about the cost share and all other things that will be included with RFA once we issue it.
Декілька запитань, чи можна кошти гранту використовувати для
Can the grant be used to offer loans to farmers which are attending their plots, but they're not officially registered as SMEs? Can it be offered as loans to women as individuals? So in this setting, these people are individual farmers that are not official SMEs. I guess that's the point. And the question is, can we use the grant in order to offer loans to individuals doing farming or some entrepreneurial stuff?
Так.
Hello, I can add something to this question. So if you have a credit union or a financial company, it can get a grant. Can we use this money to offer loans to farmers in the village? Or do we need to offer these loans to SMEs if they're registered officially in the country? So we need to see if we could offer loans to individuals like farmers, local farmers, which are not registered as entrepreneurs or legal entities or businesses. Well, I guess there should be SMEs registered as SMEs. There should not be individual farmers or operators. So they should be SMEs.
I know that at least on 2 or 3 different occasions, other USAID projects have given grants to credit unions. I'm not exactly sure the purposes or the restrictions. So make your proposal, and we will check and look at it and get back to you. The individuals would have to be registered somehow, but whether or not they're micro entrepreneurs or they're individual entrepreneurs or how the definition is going to work, I'm not completely sure. But USAID does have experience with this, and we will check.
Ну, я думаю, керуватися потрібно нашими визначеннями
Я хочу
законодавства.
уточнити, наша кредитна спілка.
The credit union that I talk about is based in Ternopil City, and we work with agricultural projects, and they offer loans to individual farmers. But would like to consider a possibility of getting a grant as a credit union, and then these funds could be offered as loans to farmers in the village. And also, it can help women's business make better, do better.
As I said, I think that probably falls under the micro part of the MSME thing. But again, let me check with USAID on what they have done in the credit union area. There is a credit union project that USAID runs or ran, and I know that there was another economic resilience activity that also funded a credit union activity. I just need to check on the details.
Також у мене є запитання, я писала його в чаті.
I also have one more question. I posted that in the chat. So if a credit union gets a grant and we use it to offer loans to entrepreneurs that are registered as small agricultural businesses, then we need to pay this money back somehow, I guess, because it's going to be a loan. So will this money go back to you or not? No, grant funds are not going back anywhere. A grant is not going to go back to us. Okay, I got it. Thanks. And the last question that I can see in the chat right now, it's about buying bonds. It's also part of lending. So is it possible to buy bonds issued by companies, agricultural companies in particular? Formally, it is lending, but I don't quite see what's going to be the incentive behind it. Like, if you use the funds to buy bonds and nothing else, if it's bluntly about that, then I guess it doesn't quite match the purpose. That's not the best use of grant funds.
Все, колеги, я не бачу більше запитань.
Okay, I don't see any further questions right now. No hands. So I think we have furnished answers to almost all of the questions. We're gonna provide some more answers later on. As Ilona suggested, we will prepare the answers and over time you all will receive them.
Robert, Ilona, just like closing remarks because we are done.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a closing remark, just to sum up what you just said, that I think we have the record of all the email addresses of all the attendees of this conference, so we can send this document once completed to you as well. I will try, because there are quite a few questions that we need to address that haven't been answered during this session, plus the deadline is tomorrow. So I hope to have this document released sometime next week. So you have sufficient time before your submission deadline to review the answers. That's all for me.
My closing remark is, I think shared with Colleen Green, which is be creative, be innovative, and consider the development impact of your proposal. So we are looking for development, and we're also looking for leveraging of funds. Those are two key criteria when we look at your expression of interest. And we don't care where the leverage comes from, whether or not it's we put up a 50% guarantee and the bank lends X number of dollars, or if it's a capital contribution that will lead to an IFI giving a bigger credit line or whatever. So we're looking for leverage, and we're looking for impact, and particularly development impact. We think it's very important right now to get the money that's available out into the hands of people that can use it in this situation. So that would be my last counsel, which is think of the development impact of what you're proposing.
Ми зробили, що могли, відповідаючи на питання сходу, як то кажуть, we did our best.
All right, we did our best, taking on your questions as they come. Some questions require extra confirmation and extra discussions, but you're going to get the answers anyway. Thank you all for taking part in this, and we're going to be looking forward to get your proposals and concepts.